Hi, friends. This is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight, and I wanted to, we have a discussion that will follow this, but I wanted to preface that discussion with an introduction, because after I got done, I realized that we never really described the main theory behind the 2000 Mules video, which is now being promoted as a conspiracy theory for how the election was rigged in this last 2020 election. So what I'm going to do now is give you the main theory behind the 2000 Mules video. So essentially, these people purchased a whole bunch of cell phone data. They got the surveillance videos of surveillance cameras that were looking at some drop boxes. Now, we don't know how many drop boxes had surveillance cameras, nor do we know the actual exact accuracy of these data that is the pings off of cell phones. But the claim is that you can track people by their cell phones, and people who have gone to drop boxes and gone to, in their theory, gotten ballots, brought them, hired people to go to various drop boxes, many drop boxes, and deposit 1, 3, 5, 10 ballots in each drop box, and then sway the election over. And eventually, had that not happened, then Trump would have won. So the theory is that this was a Democratic scam that was actually deployed, and that they hired people. They call them mules. They have places where they would get, they call it, they're in this video, they're nonprofits, but in the later video, they call them stash houses, where the ballots are picked up in envelopes, and then people deliver them to the boxes and stuff them in. And so there's a lot of missing pieces, but what I want to do now is just go back into sharing my screen here and show you a bit of the video of the key explanation of this theory that they have. And we'll make this bigger so you can see it.
But the fact of the matter is, these techniques are used every single day by law enforcement, the intelligence community, the Department of Defense.
Was geo-tracking part of the way that the CIA was able to identify bin Laden?
It certainly played a role. It's even more sophisticated today than it was when bin Laden was. More and more apps are participating in this program, if you will.
The reliability of geo-tracking is not substantially different from the reliability of a fingerprint or the reliability of DNA.
Absolutely wrong. Geo-tracking is not in any way the same as fingerprints or DNA. Is extremely, but he asks this question in a very sneaky way, where he lines up the things, a fingerprint, DNA, and then he asks another simpler question, which the guy responds yes to. It's a technique that you have to really watch for.
If it identifies your phone, now I could have given my phone to Debbie, but the simple truth of it is my phone was there on this particular date, and there's absolutely no question about that, right?
It's there, but not at the location, because the location resolution of this tracking is not that precise. And notice how he lined it up. He said fingerprint, DNA, and then my phone in that area. And then the guy says, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Now you decided to purchase through these brokers that make this information available to companies. They make it available all kinds of places to buy data. Let's talk about the methodology. You identified data in certain places, and by and large, you focused on the states where the election was decided. Tell us, what are the areas that you bought data for, and what were you looking for? And what's the time period?
October 1st through the election. In Georgia, we actually bought from October 1st through January 6th after the runoff. So we went in, we decided to do the Atlanta metro area because it picks up some rural areas, it picks up some urban areas, it picks up some suburban areas, 309 drop boxes in the area. And we thought, okay, well, this is a pretty good test. We, in essence, sort of fenced around those.
Geofencing.
And
a geofence like you see here, this looks like the entire Atlanta metro area, which is the counties of both Fulton and DeKalb, and the line between the counties is approximately here. So this is the entire area that they're looking at, and each one of these red things is one of these boxes probably. That's probably what this looks at, is what they're looking at.
Then we were able to make purchase of data of people that had been near those drop boxes, but
okay, this is kind of important to see. Here is a place where there's a drop box, apparently maybe right there, and there's people in the vicinity. Now, probably any of these dots here would trigger their analysis, but a lot of these people are not going to the drop box. This might be a post office, or it could be the election office, Walmart. We don't even know.
Also near the organizations. Across the country, we bought 10 trillion signals.
When they give you this data that you then have to go through, what does this data look like?
It's a massive data transfer. We have more than a petabyte of data. You're talking about transacting hundreds of terabytes, so it's a significant move of data.
You have 10 trillion signals. That's a lot of signals. So what was the criterion that you set?
Final decision was they had to have been to 10 or more drop boxes, meaning unique visits inside of a space, and 5 or more visits to one or more of these organizations.
Those were the outliers. It was such an aberrant pattern.
So what you're saying, I mean, it seems to me there's no reason for someone to go to even 2 drop boxes, but you're saying that maybe there's a conceivable reason someone did that. Let's identify a large number of drop boxes and multiple trips, and that way we're going to catch not all the offenders, right, but the worst offender.
They go way beyond anything they could possibly do with this technology, of saying that they can actually identify offenders and catch the offenders. That just because you go near a drop box and you go near another organization doesn't mean that you're an offender. The problem with this, is you'll find out in the rest of the video discussion that we have, is that number one, they don't ever show anyone going to more than one drop box. Even though there's surveillance cameras at many of these drop boxes, they talk about them going to 2, 7, 10 different drop boxes, and that they filtered it on 10. But there's never a video of a single person going to 2 different drop boxes. That would be a very important thing to find, because now you have a person who actually may be doing some sort of delivery of ballots. But even then, it may not be something that is wrong. If they were just delivering ballots from different people without changing them. What they don't describe in this, they don't explain the rest of the theory. They don't explain how these ballots are obtained. They don't tell anything about how they may be changed, and how they possibly get through the filtering process in the rest of the system. They don't have really the evidence that they claim to have here. And if they do have it, they're not showing it. And you would think that if they did find, for example, one person who went to 2 different drop boxes, certainly they would have shown that. So it doesn't make any sense, none, that they would actually hire people to do this. This whole video is based on a theory that just doesn't hold any water. So thank you for the introduction, and now we'll continue with the rest of the discussion. This is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight, and thank you for coming. We're going to be reviewing the 2000 Mules video. We've got a little presentation. We're going to take segments out of the video and try to see some of the points that they have right, and the evidence that we're not seeing, and so forth. Basically, this is sponsored by Citizens Oversight, and we've been doing election integrity work for about 17 years, I would say. I'm an electronics engineer and developer of Audit Engine, which is an auditing platform. We also have with us Susan Pinchon of Florida, Paul Burke of Vote Well. We have some other people here, Darlene Little, who is in the LA area. Susan Shamblin is in North Carolina, and Paul Heller.
I'm in Dallas.
Dallas, so that's right. Okay, so we got a fair number of people in different parts of the country. What we wanted to do was very quickly review the video and point out what evidence they have and what they're kind of missing to really make the point. And then the second one is a discussion of the risk of vote by mail-in drop boxes, which there are risks. There are some partial solutions, but just like any security system, nothing is perfect. So let's get started. in the video itself, we wanted to look at what actual evidence did they provide in the video. And I've got a little list here. We're going to go through some of these clips. And first of all, in the very beginning of the video, you'll see, and throughout it, surveillance videos of people inserting ballots into boxes. And the very first segment is very nicely done in terms of being persuasive on things. Now, what they do here is they're showing a car moving down the street. They actually can't normally track people to this extent with their cell phone. You know, the cell phone could be tracked with GPS. Now, guy gets out. This is a different camera angle. I want to point that out. So we have the car that pulled up here. There's no one in this parking lot. And yet just before this, we saw a different camera angle right as he's pulling up. The car pulls up. Now watch carefully. Okay, here's a different camera angle, right? So let's make this big so we can see it. This different camera angle is from a camera that's supposedly out in the parking lot. And he gets out. All right, now this is a surveillance camera, typically mounted in a single thing, but you can see there's no one out here with their cell phone at that other camera angle. So this could not be a real video. He puts it down. So this is a concocted video trying to show that he's putting in a lot of ballots. And then he turns around and does something else. And you'll notice that there was actually a third position there. So this is the third angle. So there's another camera angle getting that right there. That's the third camera angle. So we got 3 camera angles. Plus this guy is an actor. And we know that because in the credits, so this guy, Mule, they have a cast member who's acting like a mule. And it isn't really documentary evidence. This is a person who's an actor, and that's what they have in that first scene. But let's go ahead and look at some of the other scenes. First of all, we can say that no one that I saw was inserting a vast number of ballots. The most that you would see is like 5 or 6, but most of them are only inserting 1. No one was shown at 2 drop boxes, and this would be really critical information. I would like to see somebody at 2 drop boxes. They're claiming that these people are paid transporters of ballots and they should go to separate drop boxes. And we never see one at 2 drop boxes. As I said, the first video has the Mule cast member. Now let's go to the second one. Now they're talking about it, and as they talk, listen to what they do when they talk about this. They act like that they know for sure that this guy is cheating.
This is the official surveillance video of Georgia.
Absolutely.
And so as the person pulls up, they don't even bother parking.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, so why would they? He gets out, approaches the box. When people walk up with intention to cheat, they look around, they basically walk fairly quickly, they try to stuff him in, they try to get out of there. In this case, he drops a few on the ground.
Well, when I look at this, there's only 1 ballot that he puts in, and it's a very full box or something, so there's another one that's dropped.
Pick them up, stuff them into the box. Then he hustles back and hustles out of there.
Well, that's because his door is open.
This is
Let's look at the ballots more carefully. How many does he put in?
People walk up with intention.
Look how many ballots he has. That's really 1 ballot. I don't think there's a whole stack there. So they're saying this guy has an intention to cheat, and he's not looking around. It doesn't look like he's cheating. He just goes straight to the box, puts it in, but it's full.
Fairly quickly, they try to stuff him in, they try to get out of there. In this case, he drops a few on the ground.
Drops 1 on the ground.
Then he hustles back and hustles out of there.
Yeah, because he just paused his car. It's in the middle of the night. He just dropped off a ballot. So that's not really a fair representation of what went on there. In this next little segment, which I'll just play it from here, they say that they tracked 271 people on 1,962 ballots deposited in that box. The thing here is that it could have been that because their tracking data was incomplete. They act like they track everybody completely, but actually you have to have a cell phone. It has to be something that that's on, and that they can be tracking. So it's doesn't mean that they know for sure that there was only 271 people. Let's listen to it.
This is what it looks like. It doesn't necessarily look like, hundreds of ballots being stuffed in.
You don't need a whole lot of phones, you just need a little in the right places over.
And I thought this was kind of cute, by the way, where they staged this inside kind of a workshop where they have a lot of tools and stuff. Make it look like they're really
Is there a
doing
way
it.
to estimate, or even roughly, how many ballots are being tossed into a box at a given time?
It might be 3 or 5 or 6 or 10 or something like that.
The idea is to stay under the radar. And as Greg said, the number is, 3, 5, 10 ballots, but then they're not done for the day either. They're going place to place to place, day upon day upon day. And so that will not show up in your chain of custody documents, your tracking documents that would identify a big blip.
And then they're not going up and dumping in, buckets full of ballots.
Yeah, they didn't show that either. So we never saw actually anyone put in more than 1 to 5, or maybe 6 at the most. But they didn't show very many videos at all, and never did we see the same person going to multiple boxes.
On the other hand, we've seen circumstances where it appears that buckets full of ballots showed up. There's one box in Gwinnett County that had a chain of custody with 1962 ballots noted on them. 10 times what we normally see.
That's not 10 times what they normally see. That would be there's only 200 ballots in a box, and these places, they had very few drop boxes, and they would have many hundreds or thousands. So that's actually not correct. They only see 192.
Sorted through the geodata, found a few hundred people.
Okay, so what they're saying is they found 200 people. I don't know why they're showing these red dots here, but they're saying they had 200 people that were tracked.
Well, that's pretty odd. We have video of all of this. And guess what it shows? 271 people approached that ballot drop box during that 25-hour period. 271. 1,962 ballots were deposited. Wow.
So let's see if that makes any sense. So let's say 1,962 divided by 271. 7.23. So that does seem a little bit high. Maybe not everybody that they caught was tracked, or maybe that there were a few people bringing them in from other locations. All right, let's go to the next issue. They show election officials removing ballots at this same location. I don't know why they like this location with these red lines.
Here are election officials pulling out of that drop box.
So they're pulling things out of the drop box. Here's the red lines that we see. We call this the red lines one. And they're pulling them out. Well, that's not unusual for them to pull out ballots.
Containing over 1,900 ballots.
That doesn't seem that unusual to me to get.
Interesting thing about this
It's kind of full. They should go and get it. Now, this one is the person they talk about having her gloves on and putting them in the trash.
From Georgia.
Again, they never saw any of these people more than once, and they did not. If they did, they didn't provide the video. Okay, the woman with the gloves, they act like she was very suspicious because she had gloves on and she threw them in the trash. This was during COVID time, and people did that. Now let's go on to the biker with the backpack. This guy. So what they think is suspicious about this guy, and only once do they show him.
Taking his time digging around, looking for some ballots.
Some ballots, he's got one ballot there.
Okay, now I'm set. And he'll put them in. But you also see him get sort of frustrated as he starts to leave, because guess what? At this point, they had started requiring the mule.
He doesn't know this. He's guessing that they're requiring mules to take pictures.
Apparently, to take pictures of the stuffing of the ballots. It appears that that's how they get paid.
A lot of people commemorate voting, and they take a picture of themselves voting. You see this all the time, election officials showing that they're voting. This is not unusual. And this guy wants to show that and document that he did vote. There's nothing really suspicious about that. Okay, the next one is the dog guy.
So dog guy, middle of the day. This is actually at a poll.
Notice that they obscure the dog, but everyone else's face is shown. That's very strange.
Polling place. So the people in line are waiting to go in and vote early. They're doing it the right way. Okay, now
There's nothing wrong with voting in a drop box if you have it all prepared. If you want to go in,
some
then
other people are going to walk up.
you don't have one in an
This lady
envelope.
doesn't care, but this next guy cares. He's watching the whole thing. That guy looks up, talks to him.
Got the ballots under his arm already. Now he's got the rest that he pulled out of the bag.
And he's going to get his camera ready to take the pictures as he puts them in there. If you consider the brazenness of this, right? This is the middle
I
of
only
the
see
day.
one ballot
There's
going
people
in.
sitting there watching you cheat. People that are doing.
Now, if you look carefully, he says he's got him under his arm, but actually, if you look carefully, he's got something under his arm. It looks like a cell
His arm
phone,
already. Now he's got
but it's not the
rest that he
ballot.
pulled out of the bag.
And he's going to get his camera ready to take the pictures as he puts them in there. If you consider
That's
the
one ballot he's
brazenness of
putting in.
this, right? This is the middle of the day. There's people sitting there watching you cheat. People that are doing it the right way.
Okay,
It's difficult for them
so
to know what to
here's
do.
a guy waiting in
So
line to put his in.
maybe say, what's going on? What did I just see?
He stopped there only
This is
because
happening in broad daylight and nobody's doing.
they didn't stop them because there's nothing really suspicious about what they're seeing. Okay, so let's see what the next one is here.
So these are the kind of things.
Okay, watch
4
carefully.
million minutes
He put in one so far.
of this. This was an organized
2,
effort to subvert a free and fair election. This
3,
is organized crime. You can't look at this data
4,
in its aggregate and believe anything otherwise.
5.
That's especially
6.
true when you consider the
Put in 6.
12,000 votes. And
Here's a
you
woman
look
with
at
1, 2,
5,000 visits just from our
3,
mules. It's not illegal
4,
to say, yes, this would have made it.
5.
Adding these numbers
6.
up, we have 2,000.
And sometimes
plus
people will bring in
views
multiple because they live in
based
large
upon
families.
last Searching these whole states. Remember,
relatives.
We're only talking about a small number of states. You didn't.
May have a lot of
we're not talking about
relatives.
The whole country. We're
Right,
talking
And so
about-
forth. Let's see what the next one is. This guy, they make a big deal about him, but he only puts 1 in. Okay, so this guy right here. So let's let this play.
They had to go to 10 drop boxes. So if there's a mule who went to 7 drop boxes, you wouldn't catch that guy.
They never show anyone going to 7, 10, even 2 drop boxes. So that never show any evidence that someone goes to multiple drop boxes. Yeah, that would be a smoking gun. If they had that evidence, I would be super
And they had to
interested.
go to nonprofits, so they had to meet those 2 criteria and then go to one of the geofenced drop boxes. If they met the 2 criteria but went to a post office box, we're not going to look at them.
One of the slogans of the
Okay, so here's a person who is, it looks like filming that he's voting.
Democrats through all this debate has been make every vote count. And I think we can now see in a chilling way that this is kind of what they mean. What they mean is it doesn't matter if all
That's one
kinds of
ballot that he
ballots-
put in. Okay, so he didn't put in many, and you would not hire people to bring in just 1. Okay, if you were actually doing this. Now, this woman does put in a
dropped
few.
in. Let's just count them.
Now the narrative needs to be that this is the most.
This is the
secure
same red
election.
lines
This is the
place.
most fabulous election we've ever had. Pay no mind.
This guy puts
to the
in 1.
millions of Americans that are saying something.
But it's
is
full.
not
That's that
right.
one that was
This
super
does not
full.
make sense. Nothing to see here. Just smile and wave, boys.
I mean, wouldn't it be an accurate?
Okay, so I think that's all of the evidence that they had of putting them in. Let's talk about what they have with cell phone tracking. We've got to say that this cell phone tracking is not very precise. The smooth lines that they showed right in this diagram, this is what they mentioned. These are the smooth lines, and these are supposedly drop boxes where the person went. Because you go near the drop box doesn't mean that you actually went there and did something, though. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it's sort of a segue into this, but I just wanted to point out the fact that they say in the film that they are filming they have the ability to show people within 6 feet of where they are, and they have the exact times that they're approaching these drop boxes. And they supposedly have all these, thousands of hours of surveillance video. So if you knew what time someone approached something and knew supposedly that they were a mule and knew when they were within 6 feet of the drop box, then it would be very easy to go back and track the surveillance video. All that given, they have as you said, they never show one person going to 2 drop boxes. I question that one location with the red lines. If you notice, that is actually the only location where they show multiple ballots being inserted, and they never state that that is an official surveillance video. A couple of the others, they said, now this is actual surveillance video. They never say that at that spot with the red lines, which is a very distinctive place. And if you go back and look, that's actually the only place where they show multiple ballots being put in.
Yeah, that's definitely, there's a whole bunch of people at that location that are trying to put ballots in, and they're finding it it's very stuffed. So they had this one, they have a few people that are putting in, multiple ballots. I mean, let's face it, there is a little bit of evidence here of people putting in more than one. And
If those are actual voters.
There's some that are taking pictures of them, right? But, in terms of just the cell phone tracking, it's what they call smooth. It could be Uber drivers, we don't know, that are taking people around to vote, and they pick one person up and they go and get the next person. It looks like it's one person going to these ballot boxes. It could be the same Uber driver transporting many people to ballot boxes and correctly voting. We don't know that. A person who visits a drop box, like in a diagram like this, they show a drop box here, may not actually go to it and do anything. They may not drop any ballots, they just went near it. And as you were saying, there is no linkage provided between the cell phone tracking and surveillance videos. They could take this. They could have taken this had they had it. And they say, look, we're going to follow this guy. We're going to this one, this one, this one, and we're going to see the surveillance video of him going to each one of these. It is never provided. Now, maybe they don't have it. Maybe there was not a surveillance video at that location. I'm just saying that it's not provided in this video. And then the dots showing people near drop boxes doesn't necessarily mean anything. They could easily show this picture of people, supposedly these red dots in front of what might be a Walmart or a post office. We're not sure what this is, that their cell phones were tracked here. I guess that's what they're trying to show, that there's these people that were tracked to this location. Doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong. Let's go on to say some missing points that they didn't talk about. And this is what you were saying earlier, Susan. The ballots are enclosed in envelopes, and they are checked before they're accepted and cast. Paul, I see that Paul Heller is saying it could be an official or another person traveling in that other one, making sure that it's that the drop boxes are there and they're not being manipulated in some way. But when they're put in, they give in this video the idea that the ballots are just put in, but the ballots are enclosed in envelopes. This is sent to an individual voter, and this blacked out area is the voter's name, the bar for the voter, the random number that could be applied to each and every ballot so that they're different. And you can't just come up with a ballot and put in the voter's name and come up with that random number unless you're an insider at the post office. So it's very hard to come up with just having this ballot envelope ready to go.
Could I address?
Yeah, sure.
This? Thanks, Ray. This is the part of this film where I actually just went, oh my gosh, what are they doing here? Because again, between 53 minutes and 58 minutes, and I've actually transcribed that entire section, they're implying that people are just dropping ballots in these boxes. And they say, well, who are they from? And this voice, and you don't see who says it in that little group when they're sitting there, says ineligible voters. And then they continue and they talk, and she says, when you mail in a ballot, you have to have these checks, the signature check, and the implication being that these checks are not being performed on the ballots that are being dropped in the drop boxes. When that one man asks, see if I stop these people, and looked at what they see.
Let's play this section, Susan. Let's play this section because I think this is exactly where, now remember what they're doing here. This is a very crafty thing where they're having this group of people who's taking a look at the video and then being convinced by it and saying, yeah, it's.
I want you guys to notice one more thing before you start it, Ray. Right at the end, that one guy with the white hair, you know, he says, he asks them, well, how would we prove this? And he's getting very close to, you know, the fact that these ballots have to be are in envelopes and have to be validated, just like any ballot you drop in a U.S. mailbox. And Sousa sees it's getting too close to the truth, and he diverts him and says, well, but it's ambiguous about the ballots. What we're really looking at is this geo-tracking, and, you know, it gets them right back on the whole intrigue about the geo-tracking. So,
okay, so let's watch it though, Susan. Let's watch it, because you explaining it is not as good as just watching it.
Right.
And so this is when they get pretty close, but of course this whole thing is edited. So if they did get really close, they just took it out. So here's this section.
Well, it's my martyrdom. They claim all of these places we have found maybe 4, maybe 50 phony ballots.
These aren't phony ballots.
Right,
No one's
okay,
ever-
so
this is a very novel order.
they're phony names.
No,
There's no name on the ballot, Dennis.
So they're saying that they're phony names. Now this guy says there's no names on the ballots, but they have to be in those envelopes. They have to either be harvested and are legitimate ballots with names on them. You can't just come up with a phony name. So this guy actually says that they've been taken out of the envelopes. Let's listen to that a little bit more.
Okay, let's say we got access to every single ballot thrown into the ballot boxes. Would we be able to prove this is a fraud?
It's the perfect crime because it cannot be curated after it's committed, because the evidence has no connection to the person who is meant to be voting. That's the problem. As soon as it gets taken out of the envelope, the identity of the voter.
Okay, so he said a key thing there. As soon as that ballot is taken out of the envelope, it's true that you cannot find out who it is, but it isn't taken out of the envelope until after they have processed it. So these ballots go in to, you put your ballot inside an envelope like this, you have to sign it. You have your name already on here with all of your voter number already on it. So it isn't just like a person would walk in and sign something and say, yeah, my name is Ray Lutz and here's my signature. I also have to say, yeah, this was the letter that you sent to me and I received it at my home and I'm returning that and I'm Ray Lutz and I'm signing it. So there's a lot more that's there that you would have to have in order to put these in. So these are not blank ballots that are being put in. These are not, as they said, they started out to say these are bogus ballots that are completely, that are not tied to anyone. And they had to say, no, that's not true. So they didn't really explain exactly what their theory is here. Let's just say that the checking includes signature matching, and until they validate the ballot envelope to make sure it's the right voter, the ballot is not removed. And sometimes they will invalidate these and not accept them, and those will be left over at the end. Let's go on to another point here that they didn't mention at all. And they said, well, why don't these people just use the Postal Service? You may remember that in 2020, there was Postmaster General DeJoy, who was installed by President Trump. Many people view depositing ballots in drop boxes as safer than using the Postal Service. Postal Service, prior Deputy Postmaster General, said that the new policies could disenfranchise voters, and it could. You could have a USPS that would just look at a voter's name, pair them up to the database and say, that's the wrong party, put it in the dumpster and never send it along. So this was the scare that they had. So that was the reason a lot of people weren't using just regular mail. All right, here's a few more points I want to cover about that they did not.
Can you keep playing a little more of them talking? Because when they ask, she says, she says, go ahead, just keep playing because it's unbelievable.
John Doe is from a John Doe who is dead or a John Doe who is moved. Is that correct?
Or voted somewhere else.
Or voted, so why is that not provable?
There's an easy way to bust it, but it's not the way you think. It's not to go find the ballots in the ballot mix. You can't do that. The way to find it is these guys have the cell phone identification of all the mules.
Okay, so he goes back to the geo-tracking. That actually can't do it either. Because even if you had the tracking and you could track the person there, that doesn't mean that they're putting in anything wrong. They could be putting in legitimate ballots, even though they look like a mule. And I think that's what they had here. Is that enough, Susan?
Yes, and last point, we didn't go back as far as when they ask, who are these voters? And a voice from, we don't know who said it because it doesn't show the person, says, ineligible voters.
Yeah, it's
And
right.
that's the
It's
part
right
that's
in here. It's right in this one section when they start to discuss this. Go
Yeah.
back a little bit more. Let's play this.
Criminal
Like
activity.
about,
But there's a ton more, you would guess, that you have not even touched.
You are talking about 200,000-300,000 ballots that were just harvested in only your geolocated locations.
So he says that there's no evidence that they were harvested at these geolocations.
But you are talking, what, 5% of America? Less than 5%. Okay. So the case closed. Sorry, gentlemen.
Case closed. That's funny, isn't it? Case
yeah,
closed.
it's actually,
By hearing that.
Closed.
All right, so I do a heroic thing that not necessarily others here do. I read the New York Times every day.
That's
And
crazy.
well, it's my martyrdom. They claim all of these places we have found maybe 4, maybe 50 phony ballots.
These aren't phony ballots.
Right.
Okay, so these are not phony ballots. So that's what they're saying. Let me go back to,
yeah, it's before that.
yeah, okay, well, I don't want to get too belabored on the point of just seeing what they're saying because they really don't explain it. And so what we want to do here is, here's the point that even if people were dropping off ballots for other people, and if that's not appropriate, if it's not against the law and it's something else, it doesn't mean that the ballots have been altered or that they're wrong or ineligible. You may say, well, I'm going to go to the retirement home and pick up ballots from everybody who can't walk and then bring them in for them. They can't drive or walk. And so you go in and you bring in those ballots. If you don't do anything to the ballots, there's nothing wrong with that activity. It may be against the rules to do that, but that means these people are going to have a very hard time getting it in, although they could just mail it. All right, let's be.
Different states are different. Some states allow that, and some states don't allow you to drop off anything but your own and family members.
That's a
But
good
if they're
point.
by state.
So
Go ahead.
sometimes it's not wrong at all. If they were altered, it would be far easier and cheaper just to mail them. Okay, there's no reason to use this. Hire mules, go to drop boxes, all the stuff that they're showing doesn't make any sense at all, none. And any such hacking, if it was viable, could be done by either party. Let's go over the main possible frauds that could be deployed here. And the first one is intercept a blank ballot and an envelope before it reaches the voter. This would be where you might find ballots maybe in mail rooms and other things that have been mailed to the voter, but it hasn't been received by the voter yet. So what you would do then is vote it and forge a signature and then return it. You'd have to have the signature. You'd have to, if you're going to get this through the signature processing, you'd have to forge it. But signature matching is very weak. It is not a very strong filter. There's no reason to use drop boxes if you do this. It's no benefit at all. In fact, you'd be better off just mailing them. This is the same kind of scenario as the deceased voter or moved voter case, where you have someone that receives a ballot at their home, perhaps, of somebody who is their relative even who died and is still receiving ballots, for years, or maybe somebody that used to live there and they're still getting a ballot at that address. Now, if it was your relative, you might know how they signed their name and you could easily forge it. A voter that's moved away would be a bit harder to know what their signature is, but these are very low volume. They're not partisan based. So it isn't something that you can influence a vast number of ballots and move the needle. How you can combat this is to use the ericstates.org. That actually helps states clean their lists. Every state should be involved in this. Electronic Registration Information Center has the sole mission of assisting states to improve the accuracy of their voter rolls. By taking these voters off that don't live there anymore, they actually wind up putting them on a different voter roll. And so it isn't a purging effect. It's actually kind of a net equal. We should see every state involved in that to clean the list, because that would eliminate this fear, but it's a very small risk. Now, special paper or random numbers on the ballots doesn't help this case because these are ballots, they have the right kind of paper, they have the right number for that ballot. So when it comes in, there'd be no way to know. Voters might notice if they notice that the election office says they already received a ballot from them. So this would raise a red flag. So that'd be the first set of things. The second set is if the fraudster intercepts a voted ballot, okay, and the envelope after it is already cast. At least the voter thinks they've cast it before it gets to the election office. So it's been put in a ballot box or some other place, possibly steams open the envelope, and then either changes the vote on the ballot or maybe even swaps out the whole envelope. Now, this was the case because this is one that actually did happen in the recent past.
Well, you told me about this remarkable election in which you had vote harvesting and vote trafficking, but it was on behalf of a Republican candidate.
Exactly. In North Carolina, it was unique in that it actually overturned an election.
There's going to be a new election in the North Carolina congressional district engulfed in a scandal over voting fraud.
This all centers around allegations that an operative for Harris then hired a team of people to harvest absentee ballots, paying them between $2 and $3 a vote.
So you have an activist, the guy's name was McCrae Dowless, and he worked for the Bladen Improvement Association, which was a kind of an African-American get voters to the polls, but apparently they were doing all kinds of vote harvesting, and he learned the strategy. Then he broke with them, and he took his services to Mark Harris, a Republican, well, actually a pastor who was running.
Correct.
And Harris won. He pulled it off.
In 40 years of doing this, we've seen that.
Okay, so they sort of blame this on the African-American activists, but still it was a Republican who did it.
By the way, I know the whole history of that Bladen County.
Yeah, really? Go ahead.
The African-American activists had nothing to do with that vote harvesting. They are Democrats. I've listened, I've read, I've listened. I never even knew that guy was ever involved with them. I'm going to go back and check. But that particular actual ballot harvesting was a Republican. It had nothing to do with that, with the African-American organization. Thanks.
Yeah. So they want to make this look like it's the Democrats doing it. So what they did there, though, is they intercepted the ballot after they were voted, and they would go door to door and they would say, I'd like to help you by delivering your ballot. And people were paid for harvest. And then they would open them up and change them. Something, either vote anything that was not voted, they would vote it their way. Or, and I think that's mainly what they did. Sometimes you can overvote on somebody, you can add a vote, and so that vote is invalidated if you don't like how they voted. This could be done by compromised postal workers. They could intercept them. They could do this same scenario. And so that's the worry. If you had really compromised election workers, they could do this fraud. Now, the simplified version, which is something that maybe would be easier if you were a postal worker, is not a worry about changing the ballot. You just discard the ballots that are from people who are of the wrong party. No signature forging is required. The signature is already there. Special paper, random number doesn't help. So that's kind of hard to catch. Ballot harvesting, it was illegal, and they kind of loosened it up, especially California. They loosened it way up, but they've tightened it back down so that you're not allowed to do the same sort of ballot harvesting, which again, if it's not done illicitly by changing the ballots, there's no harm in bringing the ballot in for someone, as long as you bring it in and as long as you don't change it. But the risk is too high. So let's just get rid of ballot harvest. Having private drop boxes is not allowed. And they were trying this in the Republican Party office. They said, put your ballot in here. And they said, no, you can't have any private harvesting at all. No internal drop boxes within your party office. And one way to look at this is to have plenty of public drop boxes so that there's no need for effort to get to them. What they do here in San Diego County is staff them. The reason they do it here in San Diego, because they have a very high volume of vote by mail ballots. They make sure that the signature is correct before it gets turned in. In Orange County, they have an envelope scanner, which scans the envelope as it's inserted in the box, so that then you get a ping, you get a text message that says, we received your ballot. That's pretty cool. And so that's just been something that's been added in Orange County, California. That is something that we should take a harder look at, how we can actually track, like as soon as that ballot gets in, one ballot goes in and then the person gets pinged. You've been voted. Okay, your ballot was just voted. And if you get a ping and you didn't vote, then that would be a pretty good check on this whole concept of people harvesting and putting it in. Okay, next, the final possible fraud is actually very unlikely, and that is to create new envelopes and ballots from scratch and complete them and cast them. So you're not harvesting either before the person votes or after they voted. Instead, you're just creating you might be a worker at the print shop that creates the ballots and the envelopes, and you have the ability to create all this. So it wouldn't be that hard in that case. So we can't eliminate it as just because it seems difficult. This would need to focus on voters who rarely vote, because if you cast a second ballot for voters who already voted, then it wouldn't be accepted, but it would probably cause an alert. Many extra ballots are coming in. Would be helped by special paper and a random number, because then it would be hard to make those, but not really, not if you had the fraudster in the print shop. So it would be hard to, in that case, it'd be easy. But it does require the most amount of work, because you have to generate fake documents and get the signatures and the private information. And so therefore, this is less likely to happen. So it's usually those voting scenarios. Finally, let's cover these protective measures, and then we'll open it up to any comments that people on the team have. First of all, the envelope is the most important protective measure. People forget about this, as they did in the movie. They didn't really mention that these are covered by an envelope. It has a person's name on it. Is the most important protective measure to stop anything from happening. If they use special paper and maybe other techniques and make it difficult to do it, that could help, but as I said, not in the case where the fraudster is related to the print shop. If you put random numbers on the envelopes, that can help too, because you can't get that random number. So in the signature batching, it's kind of a weak check, but it's important, because the person has to come up with a signature, and if you don't know what it is, it's very hard to come up and actually sign the person's name. But signatures can be fairly easily found. Some places do all human eye matching, like they did in Maricopa County, Arizona. There was 100% viewing by operators to check them. But in a lot of places do machine matching with artificial intelligence to try to match them up. But this is a kind of a weak thing. The most important thing is getting the right envelope. And that is sent to the specific voter, has their name on it, and they have to return that and then sign it and return it. So the signature is kind of the weak part. Just that envelope is important. Now, if we added additional private information, like some people say, we want you to put your driver's license number or something else on it, then that can also help, but those are so easily available. So that's really not going to help much. I think staffing at drop boxes is kind of a good idea, because it would mean that you would not end up with really full drop boxes. You could help people make sure their signatures are not missing. There could be other checks. Like, I think one way to do it would be maybe have maybe optional, where you put in your driver's license into a slot and it collects your information, and then you put your ballot in. So then you would be pairing this person up with their ID and their ballot. And that would certainly reduce somebody putting in a whole bunch of ballots. Certainly the staffing, as I said, just cuts costs, because they don't have to do the round and around, like the missing signature comes in and they go back and have to ask. Okay, so that's what I had. And I think what I want to do now is there anything from the group here that wants to bring anything up? Was there any other comments? Go back to the video here and see if there's something we want to bring up. Was there any, Susan Penchon, did you want to make any final comments?
No, well, only to just summarize it. I think, again, if people look at the film, which has been taken down, by the way, the free version, but if you start at 53 minutes and just go to 58 minutes, 5 minutes, and you'll hear all this discussion that actually doesn't make any sense. And one of the key things being that when they ask who do these ballots belong to, somebody's voice says ineligible voters. And as
Right.
Ray has said, they have to be in envelopes of an eligible voter with a signature, whether it's real or forged, we wouldn't know, but it has to be. And if it's an ineligible voter, it will be discarded when it gets to the elections office. So that's a fear thing. They left that in there, not because it's true, but because people who don't know any better are going to listen to that. and think that all these ballots being stuffed into all these boxes are all of ineligible voters who are somehow getting their votes counted and causing a change in the election results. And that is fraudulent itself. I mean, if to imply that these things are true when they're not. Another point I'd like to make is he interviews Hans Van Spakovsky, who used to be an attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice, and they discuss a ballot harvesting case. It is actually the same case from Bladen County, North Carolina. But when he's talking to Hans Van Spakovsky, they never repeat that it was Republicans or that it's the same instance. It sounds like a new instance. And Hans Van Spakovsky says at the beginning of the interview, well, unfortunately, my experience has been this is mostly Democrats. And then he goes on to describe an incident that was Republicans. They describe one other incident of a woman who was supposedly caught in Arizona or Texas, Arizona, I believe. They never state whether she was Democrat or Republican. I'm trying to track down that incident.
Well, that's a good point, though, Susan. I want to jump in here and say that this is something that I didn't mention well enough. This could be done by both parties. And if both parties did it to the same extent, it would be offsetting. So it isn't necessarily going to change the outcome. The other problem with this is this whole concept that they put forward in the video is that they total everything up and say that Trump probably would have won, right? This is one of the big things they go through of adding up the total number of votes, and they go through each one of the states and say, you know, that Trump would have, if they would have taken these other states, and Trump would have, of course, they multiply things out as if it's proven. So they don't really have the evidence. We've shown that they don't show
more than
even 2 drop boxes. Then they say that that when you do this, then Trump would eventually would wind up overtaking Biden. So that's their intention of showing this. They don't know whose ballots they are. These could be Republican ballots being brought in. The problem with this theory is that the other Republicans on the ballot did quite well in the election. It was only Trump that didn't do well. You wouldn't have a fraud organization like this. Let's say it was a Democratic fraud organization that was committing these frauds. Why would they only hit up Trump and not all the rest of the Republicans? Okay, it doesn't make any sense there either. The fact is that Trump wasn't very well liked in the opinion polls, and the outcome was correlated with that very, very closely. Okay, so we've talked enough. I think I want to kind of close off the video at this point. Is there anything you want to say, Susan?
Yes, a couple other quick things.
Okay.
There's an ongoing case in Florida of Republican Party national operatives who were wearing shirts that said Republican Party, voting for people in nursing homes and turning the ballots. So and that's actually an ongoing case. And then the last thing is, please do look up Wikipedia and Greg Phillips, who is the person who is making this presentation in the film. Oh, before I say that, go to the True the Vote website and look at the dramatic 30-second video that's supposed to introduce this. It's just over the top. And then there's an interview with the Epoch Times. And in this, they've changed, in the film, they say that they track these people going to the drop boxes and then to 8 different nonprofit organizations that they do not disclose who they are. But in the film on True the Vote, he's changed the word nonprofit to stash houses. They're tracking them going to each box and then to stash houses where they're picking up the ballots.
Yeah.
Ray, should I say something about Greg Phillips or not?
The naming of these, let me interrupt you for a second. The naming of these things is an art form, right? Calling them mules, calling them stash houses. A person who walks up is automatically a cheater. But let me just say one more thing, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to try to end this, Susan. These interviews that they had, all of the video and so forth, they claim to have been turned over to the authorities. I don't know why they're obscuring this person here who's interviewing. If he has information, why not say it without obscuring his identity? And so it's not like is it because he doesn't really have it? Are these concocted? So that's one of the things that I was seeing in this video, And what the officials said was that they didn't see two people going to two drop box, or one person going to two drop boxes, for example. There was no evidence of that.
The dog was the witness.
What's that? The dog?
The dog was the witness. That's why they obscured the dog.
Yeah, it obscured the face of the dog. Isn't that interesting? And no one else that was there. I'm happy because this is obviously they're in the coalition, you know, to help dog, you know, security. Like that. So it's a very, very interesting, but I do think, let me close with this. We do see some issues with regard to the drop boxes and the potential frauds with these ballots that are sent out and returned. There's no perfect security, but the measures that are being used now go far beyond what they imply in this video. And we can do better. We can improve it. I think largely, though, I'm in favor of vote by mail voting just because I like the feeling of how I vote, where it's more like a take-home test rather than a pop quiz. I feel like I have time to research things, and I think it's better for people to vote that way, where they can look into things, ask people what, you know, discuss it. Usually it's not an oppressive situation or coercive environment that they're in, and they can decide if they don't want to use that, they can go to the polls. Either way, but it's a very, very popular way to vote. In 2020, there was an incredible additional number of people who were voting that way because of COVID. And there were some states that were not prepared with the right type of processing. We know that. But I don't believe that these cell phone tracking and that they had mules, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to hire a whole bunch of people to transport these when you could just put them in the mail. With that all said, though, even though I think their hypothesis doesn't hold water, I do think that we need to be vigilant. I think we need to accept the fact that that hacking and these frauds can occur. And I'm not someone that says there's no chance of fraud by any means. I'm worried about it. That's why I'm making this video. But I want people to understand that it's probably not the type of fraud that they're pointing out. Okay, so I think let me stop the recording, and I thank everyone for attending.